Hello, everybody. Hey, we're so happy you're joining us today, and we're excited because we have a very special guest with us, Melissa Gonzalez. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's been at this for several years. So, we're going to pick her brain and ask some questions and just have a great time. And hopefully, this will answer some questions that you've had. And obviously, if you have future questions, please send them to us. You can hop on our website or you can send an email at thematadoras@gmail.com. And we can certainly reach out to our expert and ask her questions in the future. But without further ado, I want to introduce Melissa.
Yeah,
Hey,
thank you
Melissa.
for inviting me. I was surprised and also glad to get the invite. Um, just because you both are amazing. So, but anyway, thank you.
Aw,
Well,
thank you, Melissa.
we appreciate you, Melissa, for taking the
We,
time. Thank you.
Of
we
course.
do. And so, Melissa, I'm just going to start right out of the gate and I'm going to ask you a question as a therapist. How does a woman know she is in a toxic relationship? And just to kind of clarify, I know sometimes when you're in a really dysfunctional or toxic relationship, a lot of women can think that it's just them. You know, they're told they're crazy, they're told they're super emotional. How do they know that they're not crazy or emotional and they're actually in a relationship that is being manipulative and making them feel this way? What are some signs or some clues?
hmm Well, definitely, I think it sometimes it starts with friends or family. So friends or family start to tell or give them advice, right? Or start telling them man, he or she is not very nice, or man, you shouldn't take that,
Hmm.
right? That shouldn't really be happening, right? That doesn't sound normal. And so I think over time we start to get these messages, but then perhaps at home or with our boyfriends or girlfriends, we're told that, oh, it's just the way it is. Or there's nothing wrong with us, there's something wrong with them, there's nothing wrong with our relationship. But then these things keep happening over and over again. And so there's just a lot of confusion. For one, the confusion aspect as far as like, well, I'm being told this is normal, but I also know that not every relationship is perfect. And I think that's a big one is we know not every relationship is perfect. We know not every marriage is perfect. So maybe this is what not perfect looks like,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
That's a great point. Yeah, I remember thinking that actually my whole relationship, I was told, well, you're not perfect either. And that would disarm me. And I would just stop. What else could I say? I wasn't perfect. So yeah, love that. And plus,
Hmm.
like you said, I was always confused. Always
Yeah,
confused. Is this me? Is it him? You know, yes, I am acting crazy sometimes, but I feel like he's driving me to it. But he says it's me. And you're right, that confusion.
Yeah.
right. But then also it's like, well, he or she um are very caring and can be that's really the word here is they can be loving, they can be attentive and affectionate. But it's just some days or ever so often that he or she does this.
That's amazing. They can be as a trigger word of just knowing that there's more there because I know that in my past, I could have been defensive, and that's, oh, he can do this. He can be a great dad, or he can. So the fact that you brought that up, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, because it comes up often, every time, right? Even
Right.
perhaps I can say perhaps the same thing in my own life, whether it's a friend or my spouse or a family member. Well, they're this way, but they can be very helpful, right?
Mhm.
They can be very attentive or a good mom or a great dad. But it's
Right.
just, but it's just some days this. And then that's really what we're talking about is the patterns and the cycle of the abuse, where it's, of course, the honeymoon. We're great, we're good, and then boom,
Right.
things are not great.
So how
So
does someone
really,
differentiate, like, you know, like you said, with those cycles where it's great, it's good, and then now it's not so great? How do they really differentiate that, you know, it's not me? that I am with someone who is being emotionally or financially or spiritually or, abusive in any way. How do we start to differentiate that? Or how do you help a client differentiate that, I guess?
Well, someone who's, let's just, for the first part, someone who's not in therapy, that's tough, right? Someone who doesn't have a support system or even a support person to have the wisdom to say in a very articulate way, hey, I love you. Hey, I care about you. I don't know about these things, that this is getting borderline scary or very unhealthy, right? Something that's abnormal outside of a disagreement in a relationship. So to be able to determine for ourselves, this is abusive, I need to get out. One is the incredible insight to say and see, this is harming me or this is harming my children. It does take sometimes time. It does take sometimes years to be able to see that there's a problem because we're so busy in our everyday lives with transportation of our kids, with
Mhm.
getting to our work on time and our coworkers, all the little details, right? Versus to see that, oh, you know what? It's been 2, 3 years. I think I can see that this happens at least 3 times a month if I really jot it down, right? But how often do we take the time to jot something down, whether it's an idea or a thought? We usually don't unless we're really good at keeping a diary or a journal, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, we just kind of keep it stored up here, and anything that sometimes that's stored up here just gets jumbled up,
Mhm.
right? And we're not able to actually visually see what's happening and
Right.
tracking
Right. Which is probably why
timeline.
it's so important to have a therapist where they can say, hey, I mean, this has now happened several times,
Hmm.
devastating you, and either you're minimizing it or you're blaming yourself, but it keeps recurring, which that's a big one, right? You're talking about just if you keep seeing patterns of these behaviors that are, destructive behaviors.
Yeah. And they might look different too, is the thing, is that the theme might be the same, but the behavior might look different. So that's why it's like, well, he or she uh, tells me I'm emotional. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the next one is, he'll tell me, oh, that's not what happened. That's just in your head. Right. So it's just the different wording can be perhaps what gets us, right? Where
Yeah.
it's still perhaps manipulative, which is the overarching theme, to get so they can get what they want, so they can get you to act the way they want or appease, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mhm.
again, it's the way that the tactic is being delivered that can
Mm.
be, that's why we can be in a relationship for so long too. It's because it's not like perhaps maybe the same words over and over again. Perhaps they're using multiple forms.
Right.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. And what would you say are some of the emotions that, if you're dealing with a client, some of the emotions that he or she will keep relaying to you that make you kind of start seeing like, okay, I think this person probably is in a relationship that is really toxic. Like what kind of things are they experiencing?
Mhm. One of the ones that comes up a lot is anxiety for when their spouse comes home.
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
and they'll say, or they'll start to think and prepare for, uh-oh, they're going to be here. Okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to gather? I need to make sure that the house is either spotless or that the plate is on the table or that he has the right amount of beers or that he has the right, something very specific to now you're at a high anxiety state
Mm.
that they're going to get home soon or not knowing how they're going to come home.
Yes, that is a big one. Like you're just constantly in this emotional whiplash because you don't know what's going to be coming or going when they come or they leave. Yeah, So
Yeah.
true.
Well, it's that big unpredictability factor, right? It's that someone who's so unpredictable leaves a spouse, leaves a child in a very high anxious state because of the unknown, right? And so
Right.
that's how anxiety and trauma is also perpetuated because of, well, they can walk in, be happy and nothing's wrong, and then all of a sudden, the next day they walk in super upset, releasing it onto everyone in their path. And
Mhm.
now, you bring in time, couple of years, and now it's just like, well, now I'm just in this constant state of panic
Right.
or
So even the good times, they're still waiting for
the
the
shoe
other
to
shoe to
drop.
drop. Yeah.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
monster in the closet. Yeah.
Yeah. So anxiety, I know you'd said confusion.
Hmm.
Um, what other
Confusion,
emotions?
sadness, feeling stuck,
Hmm.
feeling alone,
Mm,
right? And so it's confusing because they're not alone, but they're feeling very lonely,
Yeah.
right? Because they can communicate. If they do communicate, then it's usually thrown back sometimes.
Mm.
Ugh, you're always asking something of me. Ugh, you think I care about your your coworkers or like God, I had a full day of work. Like, why are you like just let me relax.
Mm.
Right. So it can just be something as little as, oh, you're right, he did have a long or she did have a long day of work. I should let them relax. Right. I'm not gonna bother them with this little meme I saw on my phone
Yeah.
that I thought was funny that I just wanted to share,
Yeah.
right?
There's nothing worse than walking in the house, there's someone there, but you feel more alone walking in that house. Hmm.
Hmm. It's awful. Yeah, it's isolating.
Hmm. Yeah.
isolating. Yeah. And then I know we had talked before too, and you had said another sign is that you just feel like you're always walking on eggshells,
Hmm.
which kind of goes with the other ones. You know, you just never know when it's going to be a good day, when it's not going to be a good day. And of course, you, right, as the codependent person, you're always trying to just kind of duck and weave, right, and balance out the day, balance
Hmm.
out the bad mood,
Hmm.
balance out, the environment in the home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's just say we're not adding codependency in the mix, right? Let's just say that you're just a good person and you care and you love and you're able to see the positive attributes in someone. And now you have kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're thinking about the kids. You're thinking about perhaps I don't want the kids to grow up without a dad or without their mom. So I'm going to push through. I'm going to try to speak up for myself, but I keep being pushed down and
Hmm.
kicked down and kicked down and feeling stuck when perhaps finances, it's really hard right now. And it's been really hard financially for a lot of families just to survive or to live, perhaps in a one bedroom that the reality might be is if I move out, what am I going to move out to?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And if I'm not the working mom or if I'm not the working dad, what's going to happen? Custody wise, there's so many
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. I think the fear of the unknown sometimes keeps us in a relationship by itself
Yeah.
because you
Hmm.
don't know what that future is going to look like.
I would 100% agree with that because that is exactly what I went through in my first marriage. I think by the second one, I'm like, I knew I could get through it, but for the first one, there was a lot of fears of how am I going to provide? What is that going to look like? I mean, so that's definitely a huge factor. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. But the key was that is that you went through an experience and by the second time around, you knew you could do it no matter what. No matter if it was going
Right.
to be difficult or whatever hardships,
Right.
you were willing to endure it because you know that it was probably going to be better than the
Right.
situation you were in. But
Yes.
most of the time, we don't have that first experience. And so we think, God, it's probably going to be worse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And that's why we leave. I mean, the victim will leave about seven times before they're finally done.
An
And I
average.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Hmm.
Deana, you left 9 times. I left five in my first,
Hmm.
but in my second, I left once.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. And, and like Melissa, what you alluded to, I like and I know, Lizzie, this is part of your first relationship too. When you have kids, then it just makes everything so complicated,
Yes.
and if your kids are grown and they're going to be okay, it's not as difficult. But man, when they're young
Mhm.
and now you're thinking about tearing apart their home and the only home that they know, and this person who now you probably realize is kind of crazy, they're going to get custody. Oh, it just goes to a whole rabbit hole with that. So it's,
Well, even what you just said too now, it's funny how you worded that. You said, I think you said something along the lines of, I'd be tearing the home,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is funny because we're not the ones tearing the home,
Right.
right,
right? We're doing something about it, about the
right.
person who is tearing up the home. But
Right.
then we still feel like we're the ones doing it by trying to get
Oh,
out,
great
which is a whole
point.
confusing thing in itself.
It, it is. It is. I think that's why this is such a difficult subject and one that's really hard to approach because there's so many, a bag full of emotions that are involved that you don't know which one to pull out of the
No.
bag and deal with. Now,
And
I
the
haven't,
thing about sure, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go
Oh no, I
ahead.
was just gonna say the thing about emotions is just the complexity because they're all kind of overlap one another. And
Right.
sometimes that's why when people say, like, I don't even know what I'm feeling.
Mm, they
Because
get
they're
numb.
just, well, that and everything just kind of blends in together into just a giant mush
Oh, gosh.
of, I just feel trapped and
Yeah.
stuck, and this is my life, and I'm just trying to accept it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have a question to kind of go off because we talked about, when you start to see these signs as a therapist with, the person sitting in front of you talking, what about the friend? Because we all know that support, especially when you get to the end and you're getting ready to exit, is the most important thing that each victim needs is a very good, solid support. But you have people that go, oh my goodness, you're still here in the same place. I'm hearing you complain again with someone that you evidently need to leave or whatever, because, we kind of get mad or passionate about it. I know I've had it probably on both sides of the spectrum as the actual victim and as the person that is a friend of somebody. So I'm kind of curious because for those that are listening and somebody that's in this situation, what are some of the things you should not say or do as you support someone that may be in a very emotionally abusive relationship? We're not going to talk about physical. Physical is easy. I'm like, if you're not safe, we're going to call 911 kind of thing. I think that's so easy to see black and white, but that emotional abuse and all the other stuff that ties around it, I'm just curious, what kind of things would you encourage them not to say?
Hmm. Well, I told you so. Primarily big one. Hate hate to say I told you so. I really don't
Yeah,
want to say it, right?
yeah,
Or yeah, but you're still there,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Well,
Uh,
yeah, that kind of
just
like, yeah,
yeah, just a lot of the on you. You keep doing it, right?
yeah.
I really don't have anything to, or I really don't know what to tell you.
Oh, that one I don't like at all. That really kind of pierces when you're at a really dark place, even if you don't know what to say or you don't know what to say to them. Yeah, I 100% agree. That makes a person feel worse and makes them probably retreat, want to just curl up in fetal position and just cut everything out of people in their lives. So, what are some good tactics that a friend or support system should do to kind of help this whole process when walking beside them?
Sure. I do want to say, and I mentioned this before, but to you both earlier, it's not necessarily the friend's fault, or the family's fault, because sometimes we just don't know any better and we're just human. And sometimes a lot of the times we just don't have the right words. We don't
Yeah,
know what to say. we've never been in this situation before or have never heard of a situation like this before said to us. So we're not trained or prepared on how to respond.
Right.
Ultimately, if we're a friend or if we're a loved one, we care and we love, and we'll try to say something that we hope can help. And sometimes it just doesn't come out right
Right.
or
Yeah.
helpful to the person, unfortunately, right? Being so that the intention is to always be supportive. So to answer your question, listen, listen,
Hmm.
validate, like, yeah, that is rough, or like that does sound mean, and I'm sorry,
Yeah.
X person, that you're going through this, you know, and continuing to let them know, I'm still here if you want to talk, if you want to meet up, or I'll reach out, or I'll continue to want to meet up with you. Doesn't matter. Please don't feel like you can't share or talk to me, even if it's repetitive, even if it's the same thing over again. Trust me, I want to listen and I want to hear you out,
Right.
right?
And there was something that you said that I think is really a great thing to also say. And that was something like if you feel like you are all of a sudden not safe,
Mm-hmm.
to have some keywords to text to them, because you got
Yeah.
to be careful what you text, obviously, when you're in an emotionally abusive situation and it gets escalated to that point. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you were pretty much saying that, hey, let's have something like a word like grocery shopping or something like
Mm-hmm.
that to text that you guys know is a safe word. And then that means that the friend does what? Calls 911, right?
Yeah. So typically whenever I have a client who's in an abusive relationship, typically physically abusive relationship, where there can be moments of potential danger for my
Right.
client, I always develop a safety plan, which is we incorporate the friend or the sister, someone she trusts or someone he trusts,
Hmm.
where they're starting to see that something's escalating or they're seeing the warning signs. But first you have to identify the warning signs, right?
Right.
Um, so then that way the friend knows, okay, they're texting me, oh, I really want to grab, even could be something specific. I really want to grab this coffee. Or, hey, how's the movie sound like tomorrow? Right?
Mhm.
Something that can be like a normal phrase or a normal word, that
Right.
if the spouse were to see the text or hear the phone call, it won't be alarming. And
Right.
it'll just sound like a regular conversation that they're having with their friend. But then the friend would know, okay, I need to go drive down there, or or the friend needs to bring another support person, perhaps someone taller, sturdier, right? To
Yeah.
support with the
Yeah.
exit,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um,
That's
or
good.
calling 911 if it's really about safety.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's very helpful, because sometimes, like you said, we're just not trained on what to do in these
Mhm.
situations. And personally, no one wants to be trained because we don't want that to ever happen, right? I mean, it's just not something you want to prepare for, but
Yeah.
better to be
That kind of
safe.
reminds me of the movie Enough. Did you guys ever see that? The movie Enough?
No.
Mm.
Jennifer Lopez. She was in this physically
Yes.
abusive relationship with that cop,
Yes.
No.
where, and she had developed the safety plan with a friend and the friend's husband or something like that, or the brother,
It's been
and
a
they were
number of
both
years.
outside. Yeah, and she turned on and off the lamp, and that was the cue, because they were outside, because she was about to have this conversation where she was trying to leave, and she
Yeah.
knew that he'd get violent, and so she was turning on and off the light, and they
Oh.
stormed in and got her and her daughter out of the house. Um, and the husband was just there. Like, he had already kind of beaten her up a little bit, but
Yeah.
they
That's an
walked away.
older movie. So yeah,
Mhm.
it took a little while. I'm thinking more newer, but yeah, that's
I always think
yeah.
of that because of that scene.
It's a good one to remember, actually. That's a pretty impactful scene. So speaking of which, as you're going through all of this, how does it affect your brain? How does this trauma, the emotional abuse and just that living on eggshells affect your brain?
There's a lot going on, right? As far as the chemistry of our brain and how and the circuiting, really, right? So if we're living in a constant state of fear, can you just imagine what that's doing, right? Where all of that energy is going if we're constant panic and constant anxiety, right? So if all that is being fueled through that part of our brain, what's happening to the more rational, the more logical? Well, perhaps it's not being utilized as it should because all the energy is going into survival mode,
Right.
right? Now you take that and multiply it for how many years? We're talking about a whole rewiring here,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes when I start to have a client or I receive a new client who's either in an abusive relationship or just got out of one, they are still functioning as if they're still in that relationship because of fear, because of worry, because of excessive anxiety, because of flashbacks, of nightmares. I mean,
Right.
nightmares are so recurring
Mm-hmm.
when there's been trauma.
So just
Yeah.
because they left the relationship doesn't mean like all of a sudden everything just goes to flowers and rainbows.
Well, no, because the brain learns. The brain has learned that we're in a state of survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that, to be honest, that used to be the case before we had the shelter that we do now. We were in a constant state of survival centuries ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, not so much.
Yeah.
But when we're living with a partner or a spouse that we're put into that state, then we have to live in how am I going to protect myself or how am I going to protect my kids? So we're always thinking about the future 10 minutes or okay, if he does this or if she does this, then what am I going to have to do? Right? And so it's just this quick high stressor period of time that the function of I mean, we're talking about our prefrontal cortex here. We're talking about our
Right.
amygdala, and I know that even sometimes when we use a little bit too much, or when we have even anxiety, for instance, it's excessive anxiety, parts of our brain will enlarge too because we're experiencing so much of it, right?
But
And
the good news
that's
is that it can be reversed, right? With
on a lighter note. Yes.
I
I
think
mean,
that's the key right there is that I think people think, oh, I'm finally out, but we don't realize there's a lot more work to do. First of all, you're still going to battle the abuser, whether it's legally or whatever. Uh, but then there's those other ramifications like
mm,
rewiring the brain to
fear,
change from survival mode to thriving mode.
right?
because you
Um,
essentially become a different person. Would that be accurate, Melissa, to say that, if you've been in, a relationship like that, like mine was 26 years and Lizzie's was 14, right? And so I mean, you have to change in order to survive in that situation because you can't live with any kind of, you know, harmony or peace if you aren't constantly making yourself different.
Mhm.
So what do you have to like what does a therapist do? Just overall, I know there's a lot to it, but overall, like what does a therapist have to start to do to help rewire the brain to get
mhm,
out of that, high stress, PTSD, malfunctioning mode?
mhm. Mm, yeah, the beginning stages are rough because there's a lot of learning and unlearning that
Mm.
needs to happen. And one of the biggest one is that we're no longer pointing the finger at ourselves, right? That yes, I was perhaps in that relationship for however long.
Mhm.
What were the reasons for it? well, these were the reasons, okay. Now, was that my fault? Right? Was that my fault that I was in that relationship for as long as I was? Well, I can say yes, perhaps, maybe, but also the bigger part being is how great of either a manipulator or a liar or how deceitful were they, right? That I was able to stay in that relationship for as long. And throwing in children as a whole other
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
ballpark here, but um it's really just the strength. First of all, the strength it took to leave, right?
Mm.
Um, Understanding what trauma is, what an abusive relationship is, what that cycle is, and identifying it,
Mhm.
right? Learning more about the emotions you're currently experiencing and labeling them. Because sometimes we don't even know how many emotions there are, and we're just feeling something and we don't know what it is,
Exactly. Well,
right?
and I know I've said this before with Deana, and I don't remember if I've shared it in any recordings, but after my first marriage, it was it was kind of violent towards the end. So I spent 2 years in serious therapy. So like in the beginning, it was like once a week. And then over time it turned to every other week. And then it turned to once a month. And there was nothing more wonderful than for my therapist to say, hey, guess what? You don't need to come back on a regular basis. Just call and make an appointment if you find yourself that you need like a checkup, And then it was kind of cool to go back when I had something I need to talk through. And he actually would affirm or confirm that I was doing okay, So that's
Hmm.
I think after the relationship, that's where the real work begins. That's when I highly recommend therapy. I think life coaches have a different avenue as far as walking beside these people as they heal. But I think
Hmm.
it takes a therapist to be able to dig in the back like an archaeologist and really deal with the root of some of these things first.
And sometimes it really is also just sharing your story and even repeating the story,
Mm,
right? Because oftentimes you didn't have the opportunity to share all that you went through in that
no,
marriage or relationship.
no,
To who? Yeah.
no, and actually, I'm just now really sharing it. I've shared it with people close to me, but you spend a lot of time afterwards in survival mode. But you desire a whole lot more than just survival, and you desire to help anybody that comes along your path, I think, as you start to heal.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I will say too, to add to that, I had no idea how bad my first relationship was until I got out of it. That, I mean, something about that 2020 vision, looking back and you're sometimes your kids will start to speak up about things that they experienced and things that happened and stuff they had to go through that you didn't maybe even realize because you were just dealing with your own things. And then if you get into a healthy relationship, then you're just blown away. You just can't believe how much you put up with. And you don't
Hmm.
recognize that person anymore, which is also wonderful, because you grow. And when someone really truly cares about you and loves you, and that doesn't have to necessarily be, a spouse or a boyfriend, girlfriend, but getting out of that toxic relationship. And I know, Melissa, you've mentioned this, toxic people will isolate you, to where you don't usually have a big support group of people validating you, encouraging you, reminding you that what you're going through is not okay and that it's not right and that it's abusive
Hmm.
Yeah.
and keeping you mentally grounded. If you're in a toxic relationship, generally those people have great tactics to isolate you from anyone that's going to infuse life into you, right? So
Hmm.
when you get out, you know, you can choose wisely and have really great, healthy friends and people that, infuse that back into you. And so once that happens, you really have an incredible epiphany as to how bad it was and how far you've come.
Yeah.
And I
That's
agree. I think
wonderful.
having a therapist is so, so, so. I didn't have one because I just couldn't afford one. but I wished I would have, because I think I would have gone through that process a lot more quickly and with a lot less trauma. So thank
Yeah.
you for what you do, Melissa. We really, really appreciate you and what you do and what you contribute.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing, Melissa, that I was thinking about, because we talked about, obviously, going to therapy. Now some real work on you starts to happen. So what are some other challenges, or what is really the most common challenge that women face who come to you after leaving an abusive relationship?
Hmm. After feeling lost,
Yeah,
feeling like they don't know where to start. Um, a big one is not knowing who they are.
right,
It's especially if they're a mom or they've been a dad. Well, I've been a mom, I've been a dad for the past 10 years, and I don't even know who I am anymore. People ask me what my hobbies are. I don't
mm,
know, right? And the
yes,
fact that I say I don't have any hobbies makes me feel bad because I
yeah,
guess I'm supposed to have hobbies,
Or I'm
right?
supposed to know what I like, what
I'm
things that
supp
yeah, what things I like and what things I care about.
hmm And I will say though that does happen though with parenthood is you kind of lose track a little bit of with hobbies and things that you like, unless you spend your own time trying to focus in on that, right? But yeah, you just a sense of not knowing who you are or friends.
yeah,
I lost all my friends because I stopped talking to them. So
hmm,
kind of starting from zero in that aspect. Work, right? Work
yeah,
or going back to school or I mean all the things that perhaps you would have done had you not been in that relationship.
right,
Yeah. Or you're just now having to do these things in order to make it for yourself. Maybe you didn't have to work, or maybe you didn't have to work all the time. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe you worked, but you didn't have to have a degree at that time, with what you were doing. And now all of a sudden you're supporting yourself. And so it's a
Right.
complete remaking
Oh
of
yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And or connecting back with your family if you had already disconnected and worrying about that. The
yeah,
anxiety of what am I going to tell the former friends I had if I try to reconnect
right,
or with my family? What am I going to tell them? Where I've been all these years,
Wow.
right? It's
it's
a
re
lot.
it, I like how Dina will put it, it's reinventing yourself
Yeah.
all over again. And it's also, you may be making new friends. You may be going to a different church or a different, just all placed together in your life. So, yeah, that feeling lost, I think anyone that's come out of that understands that feeling, because it's a little debilitating. I know one of my boys said, "Hey, mom, you're at the stage of your life that this is your time." Well, what the heck does that look like? Especially after my second marriage, because after my first marriage, I was working, going to school full time and raising four young children. I, I wasn't lost. I was just trying to survive so I can thrive by getting a job to put, the roof over their head or whatever. But I was older with my second divorce. And, the kids were all moved out and adults, and I was more lost after that. And it took me a long time to really figure out what my life needs to look like. And when you said like trying to find your hobbies, I had to chuckle because I'm still looking for what my hobbies are, but I do love the adventure. So I
Hmm.
will keep looking and exploring.
Yeah, and as far as the hobbies one, they're important. But also, if you find yourself loving your job or even loving an aspect of your life that you really enjoy doing, or whether it's keeping your home clean or and organized, right? There's value in that too, right? So I just don't want to discredit somebody who doesn't yet have a hobby or a preferred interest
Right,
where it's like, well, you still go stroll out in the community. That's wonderful,
right.
right? You go to the beach, you go meet up with your friend. That's wonderful that you're doing that now.
Right.
The rest will hopefully come if it does.
And
Yeah.
generally, I think once you get out of that toxic environment, it gives you room to grow. And it's almost like if you took a little seed and took away the sunlight and the water, and now all of a sudden they have it back. They have water and sunlight. Well, obviously, you still don't quite know what to do with all that, and it can be overwhelming and scary because you had a little family unit and you had a routine, you had security, even in the insecurity, right? But then now you have all this freedom, and I want to just encourage everybody out there, don't let that terrify you or intimidate you. One day and 1 minute at a time, and understand that you now have oxygen to breathe. It might feel foreign and terrifying, but it's going to be so good. So good. Lizzie and I have so many people in our circle that they are living their very best lives, the best lives they could ever even imagine for themselves now.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't know what they were missing, and they just didn't know how bad it really was inside those four walls.
Yeah.
So
And it can be a very exciting journey. You just have to,
wonderful.
yeah, it can be a very exciting journey. So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing about the unknown too, that the unknown is scary, but even when we bring up scary is exciting too, like a roller coaster,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
That's true.
all of that, I mean, fear and excitement, it's just all kind of all again that mesh
Mm-hmm.
of it can be both.
Yeah. And that's one reason, Melissa, that Lizzie and I wanted to start, some support groups, to let women come together, whether they're in the relationship or whether they're coming out of the relationship. We'll have two separate support groups, but we really want women to come together and share stories with each other and feel that sense of camaraderie and that they're not alone. Everybody would understand each other. They're all kind of speaking the same heart language.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes that sense of terror out of what they're doing, because there's this whole group around them, that knows where they're at, and they
Yep.
can validate each other. And that's something that we're going to be doing very soon, and we're really excited about it. But with that, we definitely know that therapy is a huge component as well, for healing and coming out of something like this. So,
Yeah.
and if everybody is everybody good? Any more questions?
That was all the questions that I had at this time. Yeah, but I'll keep writing ones down for the future.
All right. And Melissa, do you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, really only that it's co- being in the position that I am, that I'm in, and listening to the stories that I hear from, and unfortunately, mostly women. There are men, of course, that experiencing these things, but the larger group are women, and perhaps maybe that's a bigger conversation too, is men having uh a panel at least, or a window of opportunity to say, you know what, you're not alone, and there's men out here, and we're struggling too, and we just that
Yeah.
voice isn't there yet, right?
Yeah.
But it's difficult, uh if there's a friend or a family member that you trust, really keeping yourself isolated
Mm,
will sometimes only make things worse.
right.
Uh, so trusting that your friends care and love you, and that this is not your fault, and that you're just kind of riding this massive, massive wave storm, blizzard, tornado thing, and
Mm,
that you're doing your best to get out of all these disasters.
yeah. Well
Yeah,
said.
very
Thank you,
well said.
Melissa. Yeah,
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Melissa. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you both.
And just
Yeah.
a reminder to everybody, we have our website at thematadoras.com. Feel free to reach out, send us a question. We'll bug Melissa. I kind of know where she's at, so I can bug her sometimes. So thematadoras@gmail.com. And then remember that we are all on Apple, Spotify, Google, and our iHeartRadio for podcasts. And this one will be posted today. So I'm super excited to get some feedback on what you think. And if I can just throw in a shameless plug also for Melissa. Melissa and her fiance Garrett are starting their own podcast. It's going to be pretty hilarious. And it's called Never Date a Therapist. And that will be coming up in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that. Melissa is actually hilarious, and so is her fiance, Garrett. They are a very funny couple with a very funny take on real life issues. Kids, screaming tantrum toddlers, daycare prices, and all the other things you would think about and talk about, right? With dating a therapist and just real life issues. So stay tuned for that. That's coming. It's going to be amazing.
We're excited about that. And also, don't forget, if you're on our YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, follow. We would love for you to reach out to us because we care about each and every one of you. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen or watch this. Thank you.
Thank you.